Good afternoon, folks. Eclectic and Promptus here. I hope you're having a good Thursday. Sun's peeping out a little bit, but it's gloomy in spite, but it's nice seeing the sun, even if just for a brief minute or two. So, we're going into the next chapter of Grow, Change, and Evolve. This is, if not shortly before I turn 19, but it involves mostly being 19, but it might be a little bit right beforehand while still 18. So, Um, I started my second semester at Cayuga Community College. I switched to early childhood education by then. And the classes were a lot easier and a lot more familiar. Some of the classes I hadn't taken yet, but English, psychology, chorus, that was nothing new under the sun. And PE, I took a super circuit class at the time where you do weights, go on the treadmill, the elliptical, easy peasy, right? So I also had taken basic nutrition, and I want to give a shout out to Mr. Browbitz if he's still around. I remember him being relatively older when I took this class, but I want to give a shout out to him. I thought he was an awesome professor and, very funny. I mean, he'd teach about nutrition, and then he'd go off on these tangents at times, but the tangents were very funny, and I thought that was cool, and I was always tickled pink to be around him. He was great. Let's see what else. Psychology, English. I took that English 102 to be more specific. Let's see. I took an Essentials of Art. That was kind of a cool class, and maybe that kind of paved the way for me to be a studio art major years after the fact. I also took Music Essentials. Professor Carl taught that as well as chorus class, and her classes. Yeah, she was always a fun teacher, and yeah, she was great with Music Essentials too. And it was like I remember it was like playing on the piano and stuff and teaching yourself how, so to speak, and she'd be there to guide you along the way. So that was fun. Let's see. And when I wasn't in class, and I did a lot better this semester too. I even made Dean's List. I remember that very well. I got 3 Bs and everything else was all A's. And I think the overall average was like a 3.6 and wound up making the Dean's List, like the one and only time in my college career, at least back then. But extracurricular activities wise, I heard about this. It's not a barbershop quartet group necessarily, but it was like a group of ladies. They would do something similar to barbershop, and in the typical barbershop quartet, you'd have the tenor, which was the highest. Then you had lead who sang the melody. Then it was the baritone after that, and then it was the bass. But it was a group of women, and I think there was a group for men too. But I was in the group for women, of course, and bunch of us would sing. Some of us were tenors. Some of us were leads. Some baritones, some basses. I was a lead at the time. I remember it being kind of a fun thing. And so something new trying. It was pretty cool. Let's see. And I was part of the school paper by then. Had a lot of friends there as always, and we'd clown around when we weren't creating the school paper for CCC. Still part of Basic. Now there was some conflict with some of the members. Some of them meant well, but it was like they kind of pushed their beliefs, not necessarily like Christianity beliefs, but even just how I was to live my life and stuff. And some of that kind of, maybe they were trying to encourage me to think outside the box, but I guess people are going to give advice no matter what. And I guess it wasn't me. I'm not sure how else to word it, but I guess they were well-intentioned, pushy towards how the way I was to live. And I guess that's the best way to describe it. I still deal with that at times. I just take it with a grain of salt now, but at the time, it was a lot harder and stuff. But I ended up gravitating towards people in the collegiate instead because they seemed to respect how the way I lived my life and stuff. And I also joined the school play. We did this play called Angles of Compassion. It was about a young woman who supposedly developed multiple personality disorder because her father abused her. I won't go into specifics, but it kind of evolved around that. And yeah, it was a rather interesting play. It was a drama and kind of bizarre and stuff, but the experience was fun. I met a lot of great people, and And then after that semester was over, I took a summer course. It was computer math. Dr. Fama. There's a tree on on CCC's property with a memorial thing for him. I did a video short of that, I think, like last month. Well, I remember him being a great teacher, and I got a B plus out of the class. That was nice. Math has never been one of my best subjects, so that's saying something. That I'm happy to have had that. Then after that session was over, I went to Florida. My grandmother's originally from Washington State, the Seattle area, and she, along with a couple of relatives, went down to Florida, like in the Panhandle area, and I met up with them. Flew out to Florida and met up with them, and I remember we traveled all over Florida and up along the East Coast. We went through Georgia, went to Alabama for a couple of hours to visit friends too. We also went through Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and then New York. And we spent pretty much most of the summer traveling up the East Coast and in Florida, and it got me back just in time to start with school again. And when I got home from Florida not too long after, school was about to start. The orientation group, I participated with that, and showed new students around, did skits, maybe as a teaching way for other students, for the new students, of how things are. Like getting, get involved, like getting help if you needed it, stuff like that. And as always, I hung out with my friends when I wasn't in class. Still part of basics, still part of the collegian. Another experience I had was cheerleading. That was a lot of fun. I've never been a cheerleader before up until then, and that was fun. And I remember being blonde at the time and running around campus during the day, wearing my little cheerleading uniform, and then that night we'd have the game. So that was kind of entertaining to do that. And a lot of the girls actually were pretty cool. At first, a lot of us were like catty towards each other, and the coach had to yell at us to not do that. And we got along a lot better after that, needless to say. Let's see. Another thing I remember about being 19, right before my 20th birthday, I kind of freaked out. I was kind of in that in-between stages. I'm sure most 19 to 20-year-olds can relate to this, and probably even 18-year-olds. You're not exactly a teenager anymore, but you're not exactly an adult either. So it's like that in-between and having that. But going from 19 to 20, yeah, I kind of freaked out about that. Thought I was going to be old. My life was over, stuff like that. I don't know if other 19 to 20-year-olds can relate to this or whatever. And my friends at school were understanding and very empathetic about it. My family, not so much, especially my dad's second ex-wife. She and I kind of conflicted quite a bit during this time. Maybe she was afraid of letting me go because, for whatever reason, it is what it is. I might cover more about that in my next video, during the year I was 20. But 19-year-old being a 19-year-old was a good year. It had some challenges, having to learn to think for myself and, maybe telling the difference between thinking outside the box and, when it comes to family, gotta live your own life, I guess, or, but at the same time, if you're living in your parents' house, you have to live under the rules. At the same time, it's kind of a tricky line. Maybe that was a lesson I learned, but some other lessons I've learned was it's good to explore and try new things, but you have to set boundaries, be it on other people or yourself. Otherwise, you're spreading yourself too thin, and it can affect you mentally, emotionally, physically. And it's okay to have your thinking challenged. I think the people in basic, I think that might have been the intention, that there are other options in life besides what I was living. But you're the one who has to live with yourself in the end, and you have to make the final decision, because what if you look back on regret or something? You have to be the one to make your own decisions and don't let people dictate that and stuff. Excuse me, I little sinus stuff going on. A lot of stuff going around at this time of year. And there's good people and bad people. You got to trust your gut, and in some cases, you have to be cautious with who you trust. I learned this lesson when I was in Florida. I was, as you know, I was a very naive teenage girl, young adult girl, call it what you want. And while I was in Florida, Grandma noticed that I was a little too trusting and, friendly, happy-go-lucky. It's not a bad thing to be that way. However, there's bad people out there, and if you're the naive, overly trusting type like I was, that's like a blessing and a curse, so to speak. And you got to be cautious nowadays. And back in the year 2000 was no exception. And Grandma had to teach me some stuff as far as, who to trust and who not to trust and stuff. I appreciate that lesson she taught me too with that. And another final lesson, if you're about to turn 20 and you're apprehensive about it and thinking your life is over, don't be apprehensive. You're still going to be young. You're going to be fine. Trust me. You got your whole life ahead of you, and, it's going to be fine. And I learned that. And actually, around my 20th birthday, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm still young. And so it's going to be okay for those that are about to turn 20 and you're kind of unsure about that and stuff. So, don't sweat it. Just live your life and, just have fun. Just remember to set boundaries and don't let people dictate your life and stuff. Well, guys, that's today's clip. I hope you enjoyed my rambling about being 19 and, sharing some good memories. And don't forget to click like, subscribe, and share. And I hope I will talk to you soon. All right, take care. Bye-bye.